What's up, everybody? Nick Powills, publisher of 1851franchise.com. Very excited to have a discussion today about Mathnasium and the journey that a few of our franchise owners have gone through to become a franchisee. Before I kick off, first, thanks to our panel for joining me today. Kevin, I'm going to start with you just to give a state of the business, what's going on with the business, to frame things. Then we'll go through Ellen and Barry's stories.
Perfect. We're certainly happy to be back with you, Nick. Mathnasium had a great 2023. I think we just put out a press release 3 days or so ago. We're over 1,100 locations today. We opened over, I think, close to 60 centers last year. We awarded over 80 new agreements. So everything's up and to the right. You know, our new FDD will come out at the end of March, but I think suffice to say you'll see impressive numbers in there as well. We just brought on our new SVP, Senior Vice President of Field Operations, Kristen, who's been a great addition to the team. So, you know, everything's firing on all cylinders, really.
Love it. All right, Ellen, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
First, frame your Mathnasium story. Like, how did you fall into franchising and how did you fall into Mathnasium?
So my story is probably a little bit different than a lot of people. I actually was not looking for a franchise. Going way back, I spent 21 years in consumer packaged goods. So that's actually what brought me to Wisconsin, where I'm located here. And I spent 21 years doing sales and marketing. I was a director of marketing and left in 2011. Just some organizational changes, had an opportunity to leave and started working in marketing consulting with some other colleagues. So there was a small group of us. And the first thing that did for me was just open my eyes to other businesses. Once I'd spent so much time with one organization, it opened my eyes to different types of businesses that were out there. But the way that I came to Mathnasium, I have 2 children. And my son actually has a neurological disorder. So we have made the trek over to Mayo Clinic, which is about a 4-hour drive from where we are here. And we've been going there since he was 3. So when he was probably, I don't know, this is back in 2017, we were over there for one of his visits with the neuropsychologist there. And she said to me, do you guys have a Mathnasium near you? And I thought, okay, that's a really strange name, never heard of it. And she went on to say, yeah, she's like, I just was wondering because my son has always struggled in math. We have done tons of help. We did extra tutoring, in the summers. We had gotten extra help through the schools. And he just really had a difficult time making true connections with numerical fluency. And I Googled it in her office, and I think there were 4 in Milwaukee. And Milwaukee is a good 90 miles from me. So I kind of blew it off. I said, no, there's nothing near us and whatever. 3 years later, we were back. Actually, it would have been 2014 we were there. 3 years later, in 2017, we were there. She asked me the same question. She says, do you have a Mathnasium near you? I'm going, okay, I haven't talked to you in 3 years. And I said what it gives. And she shared with me that, like us who traveled to come see her, she said she had patients from all around the country who have come to see her. And she had seen what she considers statistically significant gains in their math learning. And when she queried them as to what had changed, the only thing that had changed is that they had participated in Mathnasium program in their local communities. So to me, as a marketer, as someone who's done business in the background, going, that's statistically significant. I'm into numbers. So I this time Googled, are there any Mathnasiums near me? And in her office, it's like, oh, well, there's like 7 in Milwaukee, but nothing near me. So the only thing that I did was press the learn more button. And pretty quickly got a phone call from the franchise group and learned. And honestly, for me, as at that point I was consulting and had a very successful consulting business. But I was intrigued. I thought this is something that, as a marketer, it's always looking for those unmet needs. And as a mother, I had seen that there was an unmet need for my own child. And so learning more, I honestly I fell in love with the mission of the organization and started to learn more about it. And then when they invited me out for Discovery Day, I talked to my husband, and my husband told me I was crazy. I was, turning 50 that next year, and I had a successful career. He's like, why would you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know. There's just something about it. And when very smart on the franchise coordinator who said, I was like, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go alone. I'll learn about it. And they said, we really encourage you to have your spouse come out with you because it really becomes a family thing. And they could not have been more right. While my husband likes to pride himself, 5.5 years later, almost 6 years later, he is the janitor. He cleans the toilets on the weekends. It still does affect the whole family. I have the support of my family. I couldn't do this without the support of my family. So we went out to Discovery Day. I absolutely fell in love with it. My husband came home saying, yeah, I think this really is a good idea. I think it's a good idea for our family. I think it's a good business idea, and it's something that our community needs. And so that was a long way to answer your question, but that's kind of my journey.
I love it. I want to unpack it with a follow-up question.
Sure.
Because I think there's value in this. First of all, Kevin, you need to get the Mayo Clinic's doctor's name because they should be on the franchise sales team. Like that's clear.
Yeah,
but,
I didn't realize we were being endorsed by the Mayo Clinic.
That's great. It's awesome. Yeah,
that's
good
the tops, right?
Good PR story. So, Ellen, what I'm hearing here is and I'm trying to unpack that special journey that's probably having in conversations with you and your husband, and then internally in your brain. And so I hear I'm a mother, so it connects with me. I'm a marketer and business professional, so it connects with me. And then I'm hearing I'm turning 50, and maybe there's some sort of tug on the value of life and what do you want out of life.
Mm-hmm.
If I go backwards,
Sure.
We started pooling franchisees 2 years ago and asking them questions about their journey. And the things that come up in the end, like that final tug, like whatever this emotional tug is that's happening in their brain, it ends up being, is it a culture match? Like, do I really feel this company is going to have my back when I invest my life savings into it? And then what does this mean for my family? And family can mean legacy, family can mean time, family can mean something else. So take me through just a little bit more the pro and con battle that you're having mentally as you've gone through Discovery Day. You haven't said yes yet. What is that? What's that tug feel like? And what pushed you over the edge in that final moment?
So for me, I'm someone who always loved to volunteer. I've always loved to volunteer, especially when I was younger before I had kids. But in all honesty, once I had children and I was working at a high level corporate situation, my time was not very available. So I honestly, my experience, even with over the last decade, probably before I opened Mathnasium, my volunteering was left to doing junior achievement in the classroom. And even PTA and PTO was more like, I'll give money, but I wouldn't necessarily, I just didn't have the time. But I've always been someone who really liked to give back. And when I found out and really learned about and not only what Mathnasium had down as their mission, but was able to see through Discovery Day and through the whole discovery of talking to other franchisees and learning more about the organization, how much you really do gain from giving back and not having an education background. It was an opportunity for me to say, wow, I can give back to my community and also run a business, which is where my skills are. My skill set was in running a business and being a parent. And I felt like this is a perfect opportunity to give back to the community of what I also already felt like I was doing pretty well. So to say what really kind of put me over the, yes, I'm going to do this, it was just seeing the passion within everybody else who was doing it. And then also having the discussion with my family, having the discussion with my husband, who's like, yeah, he's like, I can see what you're seeing, what you've been talking about the last couple of months, and having their full support. Because it definitely, especially being, I'm in retail. I am a center owner and a center director, so I do run the center. This is the only center I have. So it's definitely, it's retail and it's after hours, as far as after school hours. So it had to be a good balance for everybody involved. And once I had the support of everybody, it was just kind of a no-brainer. And I always say my only regret is that I wish I would have done this at least 5, if not 10 years earlier.
Yeah, a lot of people do say that. I mean, like it's hard to go on that journey. So Kevin, when you're listening to Ellen's story, I mean, like in the opening statement, I love the numbers that you say. What was the success of 2023? But what I always find fascinating is a press release that talks about numbers doesn't hit on the emotional side. And that's such a deep thing. Kevin, like when you're hearing Ellen tell her story, like what's your inside reaction? Because even like in a discovery day, you're not going to be able to extract the total package because you're in business discussion. But how do you respond to that, Kevin?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I mean, I think part of the process of Discover Day is to also kind of peel back the layers of the onion and show that it's not just a business opportunity. It's an opportunity to impact the community, to improve children's lives, to help them build confidence, so that they can take that and go out and tackle other challenges outside of math. And so it's great to see that it resonated with Ellen. It's great to hear about the journey that she's been on, and all the people that she's been able to help. And so I think that's exactly the type of experience that we want to extract and distill and show to other candidates as well.
Yeah, and I think it's cool and on Ellen's story, just hearing about the Mayo Clinic, and it could be Mayo Clinic, it could be anything. Just hearing the success of impact that just happens as an aura around a business just adds more validation to it. So Barry, I want to switch over to you now. Same opening question. What's your Mathnasium story? How did you fall into franchising?
Well, it's kind of an unusual story. It's a two-track story that kind of met in the middle. My wife and I have always been very involved on the lay leadership side of private schools in Los Angeles. And lo and behold, our kids needed some math tutoring. And the head of the math program at our school was a guy named Larry Martinick. And the first time Larry came to our house, I saw what he was doing. It was like, oh, you figured out how to slice the bread. And, fast forward a few years, Mathnasium was born. I was invited over to see Mathnasium #1, which I wish I had jumped then. But the problem was I was working for one of the motion picture studios. And the motion picture studios, with their executives, they tend to pay you just enough to make sure you don't go anywhere else. So financially, there was like no way we could do this. But what I was doing in the entertainment industry, I was head of animation for Sony Pictures, ImageWorks, and I started that in 1995. And computer animation, the interface was still like a hammer and chisel at that point. So we had to develop our own in-house educational program, which I was part of, because there was exactly one school on the planet that taught computer animation. So we knew we would have to find, people who understood animation, but had to be taught, how to translate that into the skills on a computer. And then we started getting phone calls from different universities and around the world saying, what are you teaching? And we said, we don't know. We're making this up as we go along. So I formed a consortium of 22 universities, colleges, art schools around the world, and worked together with them to help develop curriculum for them, so they could start growing these programs. I mean, today, you can find a computer animation program on every street corner. Not so much then. Around the same time, I'm a member of the Motion Picture Academy, and I was invited to be in this revived group called the Science and Technology Council. So my task, since I'm not a science geek, was, okay, you do public programming and education. So I found myself educating the entire Motion Picture Academy on what animation was and why it was coming to a film near you. And, also set up the first internship to get women into the technology side of animation and visual effects, because that didn't exist. There was no pathway for women. And we successfully placed like 3 every year. So when my adventure at Sony came to an end, I'd pretty much done everything I wanted to do, short of winning an Academy Award. That's a different story. So, I had done some consulting, did some outside producing. And then I found myself writing a college textbook, which was a fascinating experience because I learned so much about education and how educational materials need to be created so you can teach them. This wasn't writing, a story about my life in animation. This had to be a teachable book. So we got that published, and the time was right to kind of make that phone call back and say, hey, I think we're ready for Mathnasium now. And as fate would have it, we were able to get the Sherman Oaks franchise, which is where we live and is 2 miles from where my wife grew up. So this became a family business. My wife and I own it. Our son is the center director. Fortunately, the way we have our center set up, I'm at one end of the center. My wife is at the other end of the center. So we can actually come home at night and like have a normal conversation. But, the underlying theme, and this is what I would stress to prospective franchisees, the secret sauce is passion and your ability to create culture, and which I did very successfully in animation. And by creating culture, meaning how do you make your business appealing to your staff? How do you make your business appealing to potential students and clients? So we have a secret weapon in my wife because she talks mom and she knows like everything that's going on in Sherman Oaks. So, as soon as someone comes in to potentially sign up, that's it. Once my wife gets a hold of them, they're finished. But the satisfaction is the same satisfaction I was getting in the entertainment industry, which was mentoring. So, people ask me in animation, so, well, what do you get out of this? You're an executive. And I said, well, what I get out of it is when I hire, a student animator and 10 years later, they win an Academy Award. And it's the same thing in Mathnasium. We'll get some kid in second, third grade, and they're graduating with honors math in high school. And, it's a deeply satisfying, thing. It's even more so than the money. It's being able to give back to your community and being able to, especially post-COVID, to give kids, a chance at having, a good life, having opportunities set in front of them.
How much time, what wonderful story. How much time went from first seeing Mathnasium Unit 1 to you becoming a franchisee?
Probably about 6 or 7 years.
And how many times over that 6 or 7 years did the thought of owning a franchise come into your mind?
Maybe once or twice, because when I left Sony, I'd gotten busy with, other things for a little while. And then I said, okay, what am I going to do regularly day to day? And that's when, kind of the return to Mathnasium idea, came about. So, we jumped in with both feet and we haven't looked back since. We're coming up on 8 years.
What I love about your story is I'm hearing your journey on the motion picture side, and you're talking about a solution that existed, or a field that existed, but not in the mainstream like it does today. And similar to a Mathnasium, they've gone through the same sort of journey too. Of it's a non-traditional business that is now the Mayo Clinic talks about it and says, here's where you need to go. And so I would imagine, like, as you look back at your career, things start to make sense, that it does align. There's a lot of similarities. And the other thing that connected with me is you talked about how you were a connector of other schools that said, how can we get exposure to more people that want to go down this field? And the reality is that's what franchising is, period. Like, you connecting, even on this, you connect with Ellen, you guys are connected. You talk about how can we both drive businesses at our level. It's just a continuation of what you've been through. So when you have time to sit back and reflect on your life and your career, it's different, but does it all make sense now?
Oh, it all makes sense because, because of the timing that I came into animation, especially computer animation. I've been doing the same thing for almost 30 years,
Yeah.
which is, creating curriculum, mentoring people, trying to expand within my sector the knowledge base of what it is that we're doing, and really, creating success, for the people I work with, because I'm not the artist. I'm the kind of the manager in the group. So, the mentorship, visiting schools as far afield from Singapore to Utah, and, really kind of catching the feeling, that I was getting from all those places of like, oh my God, we're so glad you're here, and, help us build our program. And, a few of those schools are, regularly producing Student Academy Award winners. So, it's the same thing. It's like, if one of our students, goes on to, a high-end high school, or they're in an honors program, it's the exact same emotion. So I didn't know it at the time, but yeah, I've been kind of doing the same thing for 30 years, just in two very, very different industries.
Yeah. Kevin, what I'm seeing out of our discussion today is, on the surface, not a lot of similarity between Barry and Ellen's story, other than I can see family and culture
Yes.
as a
Yes.
driver. So, Kevin, like when you're trying to define the persona of a Mathnasium franchise owner, and maybe this is part of the challenge when it comes to awareness side, we're not talking about math fanatics, like it's a part of it. We're talking about people that love their community, impact, and humans. Is that what you hear out of this? Or if you had to define, Kevin, if you had to define the persona, how would you define it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's people who are interested in an economic opportunity, but not only the economic opportunity. We're looking for people who are passionate about impacting the community, about working with kids, about driving business. But it's kind of more holistic than, hey, I'm just in it to make a high margin or whatever the case may be.
So, Ellen, I want to go over to you with this next question, and I'm going to frame it like this. Ultimately, anybody that could be watching this as a prospective franchise buyer, if you think through what buying a franchise is, you're going to invest a portion of your life savings into a business that you don't really have control over. You have control of how you operate it at the local level, but you're buying into a brand. You're also going to go to a discovery day where you may meet a human being one time that you're actually going to say, yes, I'm going to sign up for. So it is a complex process, but it's so fruitful in the end. If X would have happened during your process, is there anything that could have tripped you up that made you say no? That could have made you say no? Because again, like I'm putting it in the shoes of someone who is probably bouncing back and forth between
Sure.
yes and no.
Yeah, I'll be in all honesty, I did not do a lot of research in other franchises because I was not in the market. I was not in a situation where I was running away from something. I was not looking for some sort of a new investment. I just learned about the opportunity. So I kind of went into it a little naively, in all honesty. Yeah, I had done a lot of business building for a large corporation and for a lot of other smaller companies. So I knew how to run a business. So the business part of it didn't really make me too nervous. And I did a lot of research, when I started to go through planning for Discovery Day, I did a lot of research, obviously, for what I could find on the economics of Mathnasium. They did a great job of providing me a lot of people to talk to. They gave me a list. I called everybody on the list, asked them a lot of questions. The business, the financial part of it all played out as it had been stated. And what I started to pick up on was more of the enthusiasm, the passion that everybody had for it that I was talking to. So in going out to Discovery Day, I think for me, it just seeing, and now when I was there, I went through Discovery Day in 2017. So at that point, it was still a founders-led organization. So as of now, we obviously Rourke is now our owner overall of Mathnasium, and I've seen some changes from a business perspective that I think are nothing but positive. But for me, going into Discovery Day, having the financial understanding, the organizational understanding, just bringing in the culture that they were able to even just do within a day. I mean, it was literally Discovery Day. And I'll also share that when I was out for Discovery Day, that was my first time I had stepped foot in a Mathnasium in Los Angeles. I got on a plane, flew out, and I had not even gone into a Mathnasium. So I was going into it just from what I had read and what I had researched. And I walked into the center. They take you into their main center there, the original one, and you get to watch it in action. You get to see all the enthusiasm, not only just with the instructors, and it's fun. It was just high energy. And I thought, you know what? I have been working with organizations selling toilet paper. I have been marketing, sheet metal manufacturing, insurance, financials. I mean, everything. I thought this is something that I feel like I can really get behind. I can use the skills I already have, give back, and get excited about. So to answer your question, if there's anything that really could have tripped me up, I suppose if I had gone into Discovery Day and came out of it feeling like it was just nothing but sharing of numbers and sharing, here's the results or whatever. But I went into this business eyes wide open, knowing that it's a risk. Obviously, it's always a risk, but that I had the passion. I knew that being around passionate people, I'm the person who I don't let things fail. So I knew I could do it, and it's been a lot of fun. It's been rough. I mean, there's obviously COVID hit. I will share that when COVID hit, I had been open at that point a year and 5 months. So I was on a great trajectory upwards. Things were going really well, but I was so impressed with what Mathnasium did to support us as franchisees. I mean, they'd had in their back pocket the online tool as more of an opportunistic situation where you could help to continue on working with students. And the way that they pivoted and supported all of us in any way that we could, any way that they could, and the way that they helped us to brainstorm and how we could do it, they were so incredibly supportive. That it made it really, we didn't really lose anything. In fact, we gained even when we were 100% virtual. And now to this point, I'm still about 30% of my students. I've got about 160 some odd students now. About 30% of those students are either exclusively virtual or hybrid based on that. So they've just continued to invest, just even what they showed me on Discovery Day is how they invested in their franchisees to always make sure that we're the best so that we can give the best to our students. They've continued to deliver on that to this day.
I'm going to come back to due diligence in a little bit, but did you do your due diligence before Discovery Day or after?
I did all the phone calls I did before, if I recall. I think through the pack. I did all the calling beforehand. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember the actual process, but yeah, I believe I had the phone calls beforehand, talked it all through, and then with the Discovery Day. Because if I recall, I signed on Discovery Day within a week.
So you were going into Discovery Day as a yes, that there would have to be something crazy that made you say no, which I'll say your story is, I would imagine, and Kevin can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's abnormal that you didn't even go and see a Mathnasium before you got there. Like you were going through this, but I think the most validating statement that you said there for anybody that's listening is the financials checked out just what you expected. And I think that's very important to any franchise buyer out there, because in today's franchise world, item 19 of the FDD for many brands is a marketing tool, not a proof of model. And here you looked at it in a different way. And I think that's awesome part of your story. We'll get into due diligence. So Barry, same question to you. Was there anything that could have tripped you up and made you say no in the process?
Pretty much not. I mean, we were kind of really committed, even before Discovery Day, of this is what we want to do. It made sense. It was a chance to kind of do a second career together with my wife, and then bring my son into the business, and hopefully that'll be, a legacy franchise for our family. The only thing that might have tripped us up is, unlike Ellen, we're in a very dense urban area. So I've got another Mathnasium about 2 miles on either side of me. So it's, it makes it a little bit more competitive, but then again, it's dense. So, our demographics are just as good. And since we're in Los Angeles, no one's going to drive more than 100 feet more than they have to get to where they're going. That being said, we do have a number of clients that drive past a couple other Mathnasiums to get to us because of the culture we built. The financials and kind of understanding how franchises work, we kind of learned as we went along, because the opportunity for this particular center, which was a corporate center, we bought a resale effectively. We were still in training when we signed the documents to buy it. So everything moved very fast. So, the only thing would have been like, if we had a little more time to do a little more research, if we had a chance to kind of open the center from scratch, that might have been a little bit more helpful, at the end. But, the key thing was the support, and the value of support versus, what our fees are, from the original management team. It was tremendous. And the new management team, with Kevin and Mike and Michael, the thing I can say is that it's, to me, in my mind, in business, it's very rare that you could pick up the phone anytime you want and call the CEO, and he's going to call you back, and you're going to get a response. Being with Rourke, it just puts a lot more resources at our disposal. Things that have been rolled out in the last year are things that we were dreaming about 3 years ago and thought maybe in 10 years we'd have it. But the management team is second to none, and they will drill down to the single center owner and make sure they're doing well. But at the beginning, as we were kind of getting into this and feeling our way around, we called one of, I think, the largest multi-center owners, and he got back to us and spent hours of time and shared materials and said, okay, here's what you want to do. Here's all the potholes I've stepped in. So don't step in those potholes. So, the nature of, the franchisees, the multi-center franchisees who are, kind of at the top, so to speak, they are so giving and so willing to share their knowledge with you. It is a very, even though we're owned by Rourke now, it's still it feels like a very family-run corporation.
Love it. Great answer. So, Kevin, I want to turn back to you on this because you have the insights. Is there any other no's? Like, let's say there's a candidate that's watching this. Could be a ghost candidate. Could be someone that's active. Is there a false perception of a no? Like a reason someone's like, I don't want to move forward, that you want them to know, like, get over it because clearly it's a positive opportunity?
No, I mean, I would say we have a remarkably high closure rate coming out of Discovery Day. And I think it's for all the reasons that Ellen and Barry have mentioned. That we make a very concerted effort to get folks over to the very first center in Westwood, LA, as Ellen mentioned. And, for a lot of people, I'm drinking from a fire hose during the day. I'm getting all this information. It's great. There's support, there's systems, all of this stuff. But until you step foot in that Westwood LA center, until you see kids coming in, working with instructors, leaving happy, smiling, engaged, thankful that they had the opportunity to come, it doesn't all click until you see that come full circle. And then from there, it's, oh, wow, this is all falling into place. This is exactly where I want to be. backed by, strong systems, strong ownership, all the support that I could ask for. That's really the sales pitch truly at the end of the day. And to Barry's point, I mean, the system is probably the most collaborative and supportive that I've seen. Anybody can ask any question and they're going to get so many different responses and perspectives. And did you think about this? And here's what I tried. And, there's not a sense of, let's say, competition that you might see in some other franchise systems. Everybody's out to help everybody else. And, it's a very much so all boats rise with the tide. We want the brand to be as best positioned as we can. And the way to do that is by supporting each other. And so, I think it's an incredible system that we certainly want to preserve that culture as well.
Love it. So I'm going to put one question from our audience up just so that we can get this answered. Kevin, I'll let you take the first swing at it. I think Barry's answer is going to be, look at my culture. He said people drive past other Mathnasium, go to his. And Ellen's going to say there's not many by me, so I don't have to worry about it. But Kevin, if you want to take the swing at the first answer, question around how the panel thinks about the franchises change over time. For example, there are quite more Mathnasiums than ever before. Do you have any advice for potential franchisees that might be worried about competition from neighboring franchisees? Kevin, do you want to give your 2 cents on this first?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that we create territories, I think, is very different than other systems, including some of our competitors. We specifically create a territory based on what we believe to be sustainable demographically for exactly one center. And so once you sign an agreement for that territory, you will have the development rights to open one center in that territory. You're not going to have somebody, 5 minutes away from you opening up another center. And we're constantly updating the demographics when the new census comes out, all that stuff to make sure that, it's specifically meant to sustain one center. So you don't have those types of issues where, one town might have 2 Mathnasiums. It's not really going to happen. And then, I guess in terms of, less territory specific things, I would say that the brand has become even better over time. As you reach a critical mass of brand recognition, I think somebody would tell you, I've only been here a little over a year, but I've heard lots of stories where, more tenured franchisees would tell somebody, oh, I own a Mathnasium, and somebody would be like, oh, what's that? Tell me more about it. But now, the more common story is, oh, I own a Mathnasium, and they're like, oh yeah, I've seen a bunch of those. This look interesting. My friend's, son or daughter goes there, what have you. And so that brand recognition, I think, has certainly improved over time. But just look at Barry and Ellen on more qualitative factors.
Well, and Ellen or Barry, I'll let you guys answer this in a second. It's always surprised me, and I've been doing franchising for a long time. If I were a franchise owner, the more the merrier, because it builds and equips the marketplace with more brand awareness. And obviously, if the franchisor is responsible on how they mark off the territory, then it wins. Now, I've seen on the other side, when there's a Subway on every corner, that's a different type of business model, and you got to be prepared for that if that's the business that you're looking into. But with Mathnasium, I would say, come on, keep coming in here, because it will continue to give us support from a brand market standpoint. Ellen, do you want to anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, and as we've already said, the closest Mathnasium to me is about 30 miles away. It's in Green Bay. However, we meet on a regular basis. We meet every couple of weeks, and whether it's virtual or sometimes we'll meet in person just to share ideas. Sometimes I've had students who have come to me with their families who have come to me, and I'm like, you're actually closer to the Green Bay Center. We'll go back and forth. So I'm a big believer. We actually, they've come down here and helped us in supporting events. So like when we do different kinds of sporting events or whatever, they've come and helped us staff. We've done the same thing. We've gone up to Lambeau and helped staff different things up in that area as well. Because to your point, the more we can build brand awareness and collaboratively do that, the more people are going to know about us. And they're going to end up naturally at the one that is likely closer, where we're not like where Barry is, where they're just a couple of miles apart. But I cannot reinforce what Barry said as far as how welcoming and how collaborative everybody I've met within our organization has been. We've got down in, as I mentioned, down in Milwaukee, there's now quite a few more down in Milwaukee, but we on a, I think, quarterly basis, we get together and we share ideas and we support. And I got to tell you, there've been times where I just pick up the phone and go, hey, I'm struggling with this. There is always another franchise owner who is more than happy to talk to you, whether they're a single center owner or whether they're a multi-center owner. Everybody has been incredibly supportive from the absolute get-go. So I've never really felt as if there was a very competitive portion of it. It's all about how can we continue to build the Mathnasium brand and help more students.
Love it. Barry, anything you want to add to it? You're muted. There you go. There you are.
It's interesting because some of, my closest peers in the system are actually all over the East Coast, and we got connected either through convention or through other means. And every territory is different, and I think to Kevin's point, corporate has done an incredibly good job in mapping out the territories. They are not like congressional districts, but I've looked at like where our clients are coming, and I would say 90% are coming from inside of our territory. There's some that, word of mouth is carried across, and, we'll get some from people around our territory. But it's the job that corporate does in making sure that you have a very viable audience and an audience that meets the demographics in so much that they can afford the Mathnasium experience. And just a little tip, and I don't even know if you know this, Kevin, you can go to the IRS website and download this massive spreadsheet which summarizes line by line every 1040 filed in any zip code of the United States. And there's so much information you can gather from that to kind of, figure out where do you want to target, who do you want to be in as part of your center. That's just a side point. But yeah, I think it really does all start from corporate. They are going to support you. They are going to make sure that, hey, if something's bleeding over a little bit on a franchise, we'll work to make sure that everybody sticks to their knitting. And Ellen, I have to apologize. I didn't know you were a Green Bay fan. I'm a Bears fan, so I'm not sure how much longer
we can't talk any longer.
We can't talk any longer.
That's good. Well, I'm a Bears fan too, so we outnumber her, Barry. So you're
okay.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
And we've got first pick next year.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll let Barry, you go first on this one. Interested to know, is there any wisdom on how to avoid some mistakes for someone who's just starting? What would you do differently if you had an opportunity to do it again?
I think you have to be very careful on how you do your financial projections. And there's some good tools. I don't know if corporate still sends this out, but anybody wants it, I can send it to them. It's like a really intuitive spreadsheet where you just put in some inputs and it'll start doing projections for you. The thing you have to remember is that, it's not just getting students, it's keeping students. And part of that, again, goes back to culture, because, you want to keep your students for at least a couple of years. And, you want to set those expectations with parents from the beginning. So the only, mistake I would say that, you want to avoid is don't be conservative, under promise and over deliver to yourself.
Okay. Ellen, anything to add on that?
I think for me, when I first opened up my center, and I did open up my center. So I started from the complete shell all the way built. I built my own IKEA furniture in the background here. I think for me, when I first opened, I was still consulting. So I still had this idea of, oh yeah, I can do both. I can do consulting and I can do this. I very quickly learned that if I really wanted to build this to be the business that I wanted, to be able to give back like I wanted to, that I needed to go 100% in. So within about 6 months, I did do that. I sold off my portion of the consulting firm that I was a part of, and went 100% in. I think the other thing is as far as being open to hiring. So, we know that staffing is something that's kind of a delicate area for everybody. But I think the staffing balance I have now is phenomenal. But I think as far as the mistakes can be, that you have to be very rigid, like it has to be the exact fit. And I think what I've learned is that our training is amazing. It's really, really solid. It has evolved so much over the last 5 years. I think I would have been a little bit more open to some of the people that maybe at first I was like, you just can't work here. You haven't passed a test. And that's one of the elements that we look at when we're hiring. I think I probably would have been more flexible with that, knowing how good the training is. If in a moment, if I can just touch base as well, I know Barry mentioned convention. I went to my first convention from the home office that they sponsored 3 or 4 months before I opened, and I will go every year. It is amazing, just the way that you get to meet new people and collaborate and share ideas. It is just an amazing, amazing opportunity. It just kind of helps. They talk about successes, they showcase those, but they show you what's coming in the future, and it is just something that just continues to build my passion for what we do. I get excited about going. I come back and we have our staff meeting right afterwards. I get to share all the neat things. I even share with the students like, hey, we learned this. And so it is just kind of builds on there. So that doesn't necessarily talk to a mistake, but I would encourage people just to make sure what any opportunities that they provide you to collaborate and learn from each other, go into it full on.
Yeah,
go ahead, Barry.
The other thing I would add is the operations manual that you get as an owner operator is really fantastic. And, for the first year, at least, as you get a feel for your community and the clientele, just follow the book. It is so well put together. It is so full of ideas of what you need to do. And it's not that hard. It really isn't. Like I said, at the beginning, it's more about the culture you're going to build while you're, kind of religiously sticking to the manual. After the first year, you're going to kind of have more of a feel of your clientele and say, you know what, we want to do Pi Day a little bit differently than the manual is suggesting, or we're going to do math night a little bit differently than the manual is suggesting, or we're going to come up with ideas our own or that we borrowed from other franchisees. We just kind of redid our center a year ago to increase the fun factor. And that was based on advice that we got from actually a brand new franchisee who just kind of took the world by storm. But he was so giving and, invited us down to his centers. He gave us emails of, where he got stuff, vendors that weren't necessarily on the list of, approved vendors. And, when kids came back from winter break, they were like, is this the same center? So it was really good.
Kevin, anything else you want to add to insights on approach to doing things differently?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would echo what Barry and Ellen shared already. One, I think that we have a tried and true playbook and system, and it works. Definitively it works. And so I think, for that first 6 months or a year until you get your sea legs, stick to the operations manual, stick to the playbook, and then from there you can add your own flavor and different way of doing things. I think number two, I would say one piece of feedback that I've heard consistently is the center director hire is incredibly important and probably one of the variables that is highly correlated to the success of a center. That's the person that students see as soon as they come in. That's the person that's going to be interacting with parents and ultimately making the ask as far as, getting an enrollment. And so you want somebody who is affable, can connect with people, is a good fit for the community, so on and so forth. And, it doesn't have to be somebody who's a math whiz. You can supplement a strong salesperson as your center director with somebody who's really strong at math as your lead instructor, right? And so I think it's super important to make sure that you get that center director hire correct.
I'm just going to add a quick note on that one from my viewpoint. When a franchise prospect is going through the process and you start looking at the cost of investment into a franchise, my advice is always you look at the recommendation from an operational capital standpoint, and it's a 3-month run. I would advise increasing that, and I'll share a quick short story. I was at a franchise conference, and they had the top 3 franchisees on stage. The number 3 went from middle of the pack to number 1. And they said, "How did you do this?" And he said, "I spent 10 cents of every dollar on marketing." Mm-hmm. And the franchisee next to me elbows me in the side and goes, "That guy's an idiot." I'm like, "He's on stage, man. Like, he did it." But sometimes it's hard because spending more money in the early stages might feel like a dangerous investment that you're trying to conserve capital. But don't skip out on real estate. Mm-hmm. Make sure you're investing, because the best advice that I give to any franchisee is go to that 10-year mark and backcast what you would have done differently and play through, like, what would I have done differently to be number 1 in the system? And oftentimes you can find some of those solutions. Kevin, for anybody that's watching it up to this point, give the final thought on this is why Mathnasium and why now.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're on a amazing trajectory. It started back in 2001, but it's been up and to the right ever since. We got acquired by Rourke at the end of 2021. We have new management in place, new systems, new support. Top of mind for us as a management team is really how do we make the lives of owners and operators easier, and so that's what we're continuing to work on. And so, from my perspective, there's really no time like the present. We have all this great momentum from the support that we're implementing, but you also have so many industry tailwinds that are working in our favor. Whether it's COVID learning loss, whether it's the math scores that are continuing to slide across the U.S. There's just such a unmet need for us to go out there and address, and a ton of great territories to go in the system. So if anybody's interested, we're happy and willing to start the conversation.
Love it. Well, look, it's a great panel. Thank you all for the time that you guys put in. Thank you for everybody that's watched this in real time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Obviously, best of luck to the 2 of you.
Thank you.
Two great ones here.
Appreciate it.
Continue to have more on. So for Kevin and Ellen and Barry, I'm Nick. This is another episode of Meet the Franchisor. We met Mathnasium today. So thanks for watching, everybody.
Thanks.